Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, a preview on the AASHTO Committee on Transportation System Operations annual meeting. Today's webinar is hosted by the National Operations Center of Excellence, NOCO. So if you don't know already, at NOCO we offer resources to support the transportation system management and operations community. On your screen right now, on the bottom right side, you'll see a box called Useful Links box. You can browse through those links to use more resources and news. We also linked the CTSO meeting webpage in there, so feel free to check that out also. So I'll cover a few logistics for today's webinar. We are recording this webinar, and the recording, along with the presentation slides, will be available through the on-demand learning section of our website. All the attendees' phones are on listen-only mode by default, but we would like you to stay engaged by using the question discussion pod for any comments or questions. We have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, we encourage you to put those questions in the question pod as they come to your mind during the webinar. The questions will be read out loud one at a time at the end by the moderator, and our presenters will answer each question. So that is all I have, and with that, I'll hand it over to our moderator, Pat Zelinsky, to start us off.
Thank you, Nilu. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. That's a preview for the CTSO annual meeting in Jackson, Wyoming next month. So before we get started, I'm going to turn things over to one of our vice chairs, Mr. Tony Cradfield with Michigan DOT, for some opening remarks.
Great. Thank you, Pat. Again, this is Tony Cradfield, Michigan DOT, and on behalf of Russ Buchholz from North Dakota DOT, as vice chairs, we want to welcome you to the webinar today, and thank you for taking the time out to learn about the upcoming annual meeting for the Committee on Transportation System Operations. When we gathered last year, our chair of our committee was Bill Panos from Wyoming. He stepped down from his post there at the Wyoming DOT, and AASHTO has appointed a new chair for our committee, Secretary Jennifer Cohen from Delaware DOT. She unfortunately couldn't be here, but sends her regards. And we're very excited to have her as the chair of our committee. Secretary Cohen has been very involved in the TSMO community for many years. She is involved in leadership and steering the National Operations Center of Excellence, in leading the CAT Coalition and many other things related to the business that we discuss. And so look forward to be engaging with her at the annual meeting. And then I want to thank the National Operations Center of Excellence for hosting today, particularly Nilo. I'm going to mess up your last name here, but Nilo, thank you for all your work behind the scenes in coordinating this. We have a very robust agenda that we're going to hear about today. I hope that inspires you to be prepared and get excited and ready to participate actively in the meeting. It's an extra opportunity for us to engage with folks across our industry, not only in transportation systems operations, but we will also jointly be meeting with the Committee on Transportation Systems Security and Resilience, a subcommittee on risk management, and then TRB's Freeway Operations Committee. So there'll be folks with a lot of like interests that will be meeting at the same time, and so we'll have opportunity to engage with all of them. As you hear about today's agenda, I encourage you to register for the meeting if you have not already done so, and make your hotel arrangements. The hotel and conference facilities have some minimum thresholds that we want to make sure we exceed to avoid any extra charges or difficulties in the arrangement. So please try to work to get your registration in place as soon as possible. With that, I'm going to turn it back to Pat, and with some of the AASHTO staff and our working group chairs, we'll hear about the agenda that's planned for the meeting, which is, like I said, a lot of very great information. I'm quite enthused about what we'll be working on together.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So as Tony mentioned, this is a joint meeting with a few other committees, but today's webinar, we're only going to focus on the CTSO portion of the agenda. The other groups are planning their own outreach to their committees to talk about their agendas. So today we're going to talk about the annual meeting, trying to encourage participation for it. And one of the things we're going to do at the CTSO annual meeting during the business meeting is to give each state an opportunity of up to 5 minutes to talk about their top issues related to transportation systems operations. But I'll get into that in a few more minutes. Just a few logistics. So the meeting is in Jackson, Wyoming, August 26th to 29th. The conference hotel is the Snow King Hotel. We also have an overflow hotel. It's in walking distance, about a mile away. That's the Modern Market Hotel. Both links to register for the hotels are on the annual meeting webpage, and you can access that in the useful links section of the webinar. I'll remind everybody again at the end, but I want to tell you that the room block for the hotel closes July 19th, which is tomorrow. So our meetings department was able to do a great job and get a great deal that we're able to register a room for the government per diem. If you're not going through the AASHTO room block, the cost to get a room are much higher. So if you're coming, I encourage everyone to please make your hotel reservations by tomorrow. Sponsorships, we secured some sponsors, but there are still sponsorship opportunities available. So if anybody on the webinar now is from the private sector and you're thinking about sponsoring the meeting, feel free to get in touch with me or Megan Wozniak, our meeting planner, and we can discuss the different sponsorships options with you further. There's a couple of demonstrations that we're working with the Wyoming Department of Transportation to plan. They're looking to do a connected vehicle presentation as well as a drones demonstration. And we'll be sending out more information about that as we get closer to the meeting. And then there's going to be a reception on the Tuesday of the meeting. So this is a joint meeting, and all the groups are going to be there together on Tuesday. So that's the day we picked for our big reception, where you'll not only get a chance to talk to your CTSO colleagues from the other states, but the members from all the various committees who happen to be at this meeting. And there's a number of fun things to do in Jackson, Wyoming. We're not organizing, I guess, specific fun activities after hours, but you can find links to the Jackson Chamber of Commerce on the meeting website, and there's a lot of fun activities listed right there, and I encourage everybody to go check it out. I've never actually been to Jackson, but I hear it's a very beautiful location. So to get into the agenda, Sunday is just a steering committee meeting. If you're on the steering committee, you've already received an invite to this, and if you are and you haven't for some reason, please contact me afterwards and let me know. So the main CTSO meeting starts on Monday, August 26th. The first day is really just focusing on CTSO business. We'll be having some opening remarks from Jennifer Cohen, our chair from Delaware. Vince Garcia from Wyoming has been a very gracious host, helping to plan a lot of the logistics for this meeting. And then we'll be getting the standard updates from AASHTO, FHWA, and NOCO, as well as hearing updates on a number of other CTSO priorities. We'll end the morning by talking about research. We have a poll out right now where we're trying to encourage everybody to vote on what they think our NCHRP submittals for the year should be, and the results will be revealed and discussed when we get to Jackson. So at 1 o'clock after lunch, this is the roundtable discussion I was mentioning earlier. We're going to give each state up to 5 minutes to talk about their hot topics or priorities for operations. This can be anything that falls underneath the purview of CTSO or one of the subcommittees or working groups. So they could be operations performance measures you want to talk about, something relating to CAD or CAV, freight operations, wireless communications. And it's up to you. You can talk about something great you're doing that you want to brag about, or you can talk about some problem you're having and see if other states have a solution. But we encourage for everybody to come with something to talk about, because we want this to be a very active discussion. We'll talk a bit more about some of our other activities here related to the National Strategy for Highway Operation, Guiding Principles, which is a a hot topic at AASHTO, as well as some of the other AASHTO programs. And then we'll conclude at 5 o'clock. So Tuesday morning, this is the joint session we're having with the other committees, being resiliency and risk. So we're going to have opening remarks from AASHTO's CEO, Jim Timon, as well as Wyoming DOT's CEO, Luke Rayner. And then we're going to have the chair of the three committees talk about what operations, resiliency, and risk mean to them in their states. And then we have a number of breakout sessions planned. So there'll be one on traffic capabilities and resilience, one on automated vehicles, one on cybersecurity, and one on extreme weather and sea level rise. And for all of these, we want to talk about how these three committees can work together to discuss these different cross-cutting issues. So at 9 o'clock, we're going to have our first two breakout sessions where everybody's going to either talk about traffic capabilities and resilience or automated vehicles. And these are intended to be very active working discussions to talk about what everybody can do to get involved here. And then after a 10-minute break, we're going to have two more breakouts about cybersecurity and extreme weather and sea level rise. We'll reconvene in the main room at 11, and between 11 and noon, we're going to have a report out. Tuesday afternoon, this is when the individual committees will break off and do their own things. CTSO, we have two parallel sessions from 1 to 5 on Tuesday. The first is on automated vehicle research. They're going to talk about effective research complete, current efforts going on. There's a connected vehicle roadmap, and they actually have a panel meeting this afternoon. They're going to discuss that quite a bit, as well as working with the different FHWA activities related to automated vehicles, discussing the results of the national dialogue, and talk about any gaps that might still be existing in automated vehicle research. And then parallel to that, we're having a CTSO workshop on work zones. So there is a new AASHTO working group on operations implementation, which is planning for and sponsoring this workshop. And I'm going to turn things over to one of their co-chairs, Jim Sturdivant, to talk about this workshop a little bit more.
Hey there, everybody. This is Jim Sturdivant. I am one of the co-chairs for the Operations Implementation Working Group. And though I'm NDOT's Traffic Management Director, sometimes I feel like I work for the Indiana Department of Road Construction. And I'm sure that some of you sometimes feel that way and have some of the same challenges. And because of that, the CTSO committee has shifted the focus of the Operations Implementation Working Group to include work zones, where they used to be focused more in the areas of highway incident management and freeway service patrols and those sorts of things. We're going to continue to do those things, but we're going to also be looking at work zones, because they're really just another kind of a planned incident that we have out there on our roads. So and we have the same sorts of challenges in work zones. It's a traffic metering device that's causing traffic to back up, and there's geometric challenges, but a lot of the same strategies that we use in the day-to-day traffic operations exist in work zones. So I think it's a good fit, and we'll work to get work zones integrated more into our regular operations plan. I mean, quite frankly, I think that the people that developed some of the TMPs, the transportation management plans, could use the help of some transportation traffic operations-minded individuals like most of us that'll be in the room. So in that spirit of needing good transportation operations folks to work on work zones, we have assembled probably the smartest traffic operations experts in the whole country, and that would be you guys that'll be attending, to spend the afternoon looking and exchanging ideas of best practices and challenges, what we're working on. Kind of the first couple areas of that workshop are we're looking at the state of the practice and overview of challenges, and Jennifer Portnova from North Carolina is going to moderate that section, and then we'll transition into discussion of existing technologies and strategies, and look for a lot of input and a lot of participation from the folks that are in the room. But in this workshop, what we hope to get accomplished, there's a lot of items that are out there that are not necessarily settled science, and there's a lot of new kind of innovative strategies that some of us are using and some of us are kind of sitting on the sidelines thinking about using. Things like, it could be as simple as items that we all are familiar with, late merge versus early merge, and what are the advantages, and do we really, we know that we get more storage out of them, but what's it doing to throughput? Or the same types of things would be discussed, and to hear what people have to say in the room about whether or not when we place law enforcement, we know the safety benefits and speed reductions that law enforcement give us, but what is that doing to the throughput, and how is it affecting the queues that we have in our work zones? So, I mean, there's a lot of traditional things that we'll share and lean on each other to learn from, as well as we'll transition into more into other issues, or maybe some more technology-related issues, looking at smart work zones and queue warning devices. There's challenges that people have around the country with getting towing contracts into their work zones, looking at foreclosures versus working under traffic, moving work zones, mitigating against distracted driving in work zones, and those sorts of countermeasures, performance measures. A lot of those types of topics will just be discussed, as well as there'll be a couple of formal presentations. We'll try to minimize the amount of PowerPoint-induced comas and get people really talking and sharing ideas. And then we'll move to the Federal Highway. Federal Highway is going to have about 45 minutes, possibly an hour, in there later in the workshop to discuss their work zone data initiative and the collection and the use of the work zone activity data. That'll be a real high level discussion that won't go into the weeds. We won't be getting into data objects or anything like that, but really be talking about what's going on with the early adopters and their experiences, and what have the early wins and success stories been, and then help us understand how do we get there from here for those of us that haven't really started deploying the standardized work zone activity data elements. So it should be a very interesting and informative workshop, and we're really looking forward to working with everyone on that. Pat, you can, if you want to talk about the reception, I'm not prepared to talk about that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jim. So that's something very exciting to look forward to, and then that evening from 5:30 to 7, we'll have a reception at the hotel. So moving on to Wednesday morning, this is when the subcommittees are going to start meeting. We'll have the subcommittee on operations meeting in parallel with the subcommittee on technology. So here's the operations agenda. Brad, if you want to elaborate on this a little more.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. My name is Brad Freeze. I'm the co-chair of the Subcommittee on Operations. And on the screen you see our agenda for our breakout group meeting. We're going to start with just a short introduction, some introductions in the room as well in there. Try to limit that to about 15 minutes, and then start out first with Daniela Bremer from Washington State DOT, talking about the Subcommittee on Emerging Technologies and System Mobility. Really talking about that subcommittee and actually the performance measures and performance committee that existed, where this is actually a renaming of that and really helping recruit more membership into supporting that subcommittee. Now we're going to move on to Mobility as a Service. You saw that. That's actually going to be talked about in the business meeting, but this is going to drill down a little bit deeper. We're actually assembling a little bit of a panel discussion talking about Mobility as a Service. Tom Kern is going to be there helping support that effort. After we complete that, we're going to be talking about the Operations Green Book. So that's a project, an NCHRP project that started around 3 years ago, really using the Green Book as a model, but really focusing that on operations, TSM&O, Transportation Systems Management Operations, and the strategies under that umbrella. So we're going to have an update from Les Jacobson. It's actually going to be there to provide an update on that project and have a little bit of discussion on that project as well. Then we're going to move into some updates, two updates actually, 15-minute updates from the two working groups, the working group on operations strategies and then the working group on freight operations. Then we're going to take a short break, and after coming back from the break, we're going to talk about the what you just heard Jim reference, the working group on operations implementation. We're going to dig a little bit deeper, talk about, like Jim said, talk about work zones, talk about traffic incident management, because this work group was previously named the traffic incident management working group. So we're renaming that, expanding the scope a little bit, including work zones in there. So we're going to drill down a little bit deeper and have a discussion on items that are going to fit into the work plan of the subcommittee, but also more specifically the work plan of this working group. So we're going to spend a good 30 minutes to an hour actually discussing that, and then we're going to wrap up our meeting discussing the overall subcommittee work plan. So taking a view at our existing work plan and items and updates that we have on that, but also talking about future items and integration of other elements that could be possibly added to that work plan. So Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Brad. So Subcommittee on Technology, Venkat?
Thank you, Pat, and welcome everybody. The Technology Subcommittee is the counterpart to the Operations Subcommittee within CTSO, and really focuses on not just traditional ITS systems that support operations, but also emerging technologies such as CVs and AVs, and also the telecommunications component through the Wireless Communications Working Group. And the Technology Subcommittee will be meeting in parallel with the Operations Committee Wednesday morning between 8 and 12 p.m. And as you can see on your screen, we will be having opening remarks by the subcommittee chairs, John Hibbert with Georgia DOT and Blaine Leonard with Utah DOT. And following the introductions, there are going to be some updates from the 3 individual work groups within the Technology Subcommittee, which is CVs and AV, which is the working group on connected and autonomous vehicles that is chaired by Colin Castle with Michigan DOT and Mark Kopko with Pennsylvania DOT. And then the Wireless Communications Working Group, which is chaired by Ferdinand Milanes with Caltrans and Randy Pierce with Florida DOT. And the working group on ITS, which is chaired by Brian Seamy with Caltrans and Raj Panluri with Florida DOT. Following the updates from the various different working groups, there's going to be a quick recap of the Subcommittee on Research and their findings on cross-cutting initiatives and also upcoming research activities that are of interest. And then we move on to an update on the Subcommittee on Performance Management, which is undergoing a bit of a transition, and we will likely be hearing from Danielle Bremer on how performance management can be incorporated into the subcommittee activities. There is going to be an update on from TRB and CHRP on ongoing research activities, specifically the 20-102 program, which is a significant program covering connected and autonomous vehicle cutting research, and we're going to be hearing from TRB and CHRP staff on those activities. We'll have a short break and then dive into discussion on a couple of special projects that have had their genesis in this subcommittee, which is the Infrastructure Owners Operators Guiding Principles for Cooperative Automated Transportation. It will be a facilitated discussion, and we'll be talking about how to take the guiding principles forward at a technical level. And this will be followed by an open roundtable discussion, and we will adjourn for the afternoon. And at this point, I would like to call on one of our subcommittee co-chairs, John Hibbert, John, if you're on the line, could you please add any comments, thoughts, anything I may have missed?
Thank you, Venkat. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to many of you. I'm glad to have this opportunity. I thank Venkat for his good run through of this agenda. We've got a lot going on, and you can see it from the agenda, and you can see the benefits, I would contend, of being there at the meeting, because you stand to get a whole lot of information in a pretty tightly wrapped package. We're very excited and very glad for the TRB/NCHRP update, as this stands to be a nice link connection, as you might refer to it, between the AASHTO part of the discussion and what TRB is up to. I also call your attention to the infrastructure owner operators guiding principles for cooperative automated transportation. We could distill that down into a pretty ugly acronym if we wanted to, but that has been something that's been that a small group has been working on now for several months, and we are well on the road to that turning into, desirably, a resolution to be passed by the AASHTO board. You see the working group meetings, that the updates that will occur, meetings will also occur. But nonetheless, it will be a very busy, but I am very confident that it will be a very informative subcommittee meeting. Thanks, Venkat.
Thank you, John. And Pat, I would like to turn it back to you at this point.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. Thank you, John. So that's Wednesday morning. Wednesday afternoon, CTSO has 3 concurrent breakout sessions. The first is Operation Strategies. The second is the Working Group on Communications Technologies. And then the ITS Working Group is having a joint session with TRB's Freeway Operations Committee. And this is all happening 1 to 5 on Wednesday afternoon. So for Operation Strategies, Brad, I'm going to turn things to you to give a little more of an update here.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. So after opening remarks, we're going to get back on the topic of the Operations Green Book. We're going to dig a little bit deeper because we have the next phase of that research starting. So we're going to provide, and the point is to get input from the membership and from the people on this working group who are actually engaged in these in their day-to-day work tasks, to build back into that, to see where we go on phase 2 and help support that effort. Then starting at 2:30, again, we're going to have mobility as a service on the discussion, but this part is really going to be focused on understanding and developing the roles and the needs to be addressed through AASHTO, through this subcommittee on operations strategies. That's going to be a very focused discussion that we have. Tom Kearns is actually going to be back to help facilitate that discussion. Then we're going to take a short break in there, and then when we come back, we're going to have State of Play. You see it's titled State of Play of Operations Strategies. We're really going to have an opportunity to have some other peer exchanges. We're actually going to be inviting some states to share on some of their recent projects as it relates to operations strategies, and have a time to share and learn from other states. Then starting at 4 o'clock, we're going to start the discussion of updating the work plan and what action items we need to talk about, what strategies the working group would like to pursue, any gaps needing filling with NCHRP research. We're going to talk about webinars, conference calls, and participating states. So that's really going to be where we take out the work plan again, the work plan focused on this working group and move forward and chart a path for the next year. Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Brad. So now on to the working group on communications technology. Venkat, would you like to talk about this a little more?
Thank you, Pat. So as I mentioned earlier, the Communications Technologies Working Group is really focused on the public safety and ITS spectrums, and also engaging with other public safety organizations. So you can see on your screens the agenda is broad, and it goes into it talks a little bit about the high priority topics that this working group has been discussing in its past webinar web conference calls, and we hope to have a more interactive and engaging discussion during the in-person meeting in the afternoon. So at the very beginning, we're going to have some opening remarks by the working group chairs, followed by an update on the various public safety organizations that our members liaise with, and an update on the AASHTO frequency coordination technical service program by our contractor, RadioSoft, and some policy updates related to FCC notice of proposed rulemakings from AASHTO staff, and really dive into presentation / discussion about FirstNet deployments, essential communications during weather emergencies, some of the lessons learned, and then after a short break, we're going to be having a discussion about small wireless facilities and the 5G fast plan, some new uses that are coming up for or under consideration for the public safety spectrum, including unmanned aerial systems, the radio towers and antenna deployments as part of the 5G fast plan. And lastly, we have an ongoing NCHRP effort which is nearing completion that is focused on developing the detailed communications guide for land mobile radio. And we're going to be hearing from TRB staff on that. And towards the end of our annual meeting on the very last day, there is a dedicated panel discussion on land mobile communications that is being facilitated by NCHRP, which you're going to be seeing more details about it towards the end of the presentation. Pat, could you move to the next slide, please? So in parallel, we also have the CTSO ITS working group meeting jointly with the TRB Freeway Operations Committee, and we will follow a very similar template as the wireless communications working group, but this is going to be a joint meeting between the members of the TRB and ITS work group. We have a very interesting effort that is ongoing that is being led by Dean Gustafson, who's a friend of the committee, looking at reviewing the standards and specifications for ITS devices, and he's going to be leading a presentation and discussion on that, followed by a guest presentation by Maryland DOT on a recent survey that has been completed that looks at their existing communication systems in support of ITS deployments. And being in YDOT, very much interested in hearing from the department on the CV pilot deployment, the technical challenges and lessons learned, and as they move into a broader large-scale deployment, a scale deployment is different from a pilot deployment, so some of those lessons would be very valuable for our members. After a short break, we will be having a joint discussion with the TRB Freeway Operations Committee that is chaired by Beverly Kuhn with the Texas Transportation Institute. And we're going to be hearing from John Oberberger with Federal Highway, who's also a member of the TRB committee, on the next generation of traffic management systems. And then towards the end, we will close off with a discussion on the work group activities, on the strategic plan, and really talk about what the action plan is for the upcoming year, and adjourn at 5 p.m. With that, Pat, I'm going to turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Venkat. So the last day of the meeting, we're meeting from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Thursday the 29th. We have a number of concurrent sessions. NOCO is having a workforce development workshop. The CAV working group is meeting, as well as the freight operations working group is meeting. And then there's the land mobile radio, and Stefan on the right issued a bit of a clarification that the panel meeting is actually from 11 to 5. From 9 to 11, it's a land mobile radio workshop. Venkat, did you want to elaborate a little bit more about that land mobile radio workshop before we move on to the other working groups?
Sure, Pat. So as I mentioned earlier, the NCHRP 03-129, the Essential Communications Guide on Land Mobile Radio, the workshop is from 9 to 11, and it is part of the NCHRP program plan to do this workshop with active engagement from our CTSO members, and we are really looking for input on how the guide, once it is finalized and adopted, would really serve our members. And I don't want to speak out of turn or provide details that may not necessarily be completely accurate. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I can share additional details about the workshop structure and what is being discussed. But as Stefan indicated, the 9 to 11 portion is open to everybody, and we strongly encourage you, for those who are interested in this space, to come join us.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. So one of the concurrent sessions Thursday morning is the NOCO workshop on workforce development. So I'll invite Patrick Sun to talk about this a little bit more.
Hi, thanks, Pat, and good afternoon, everyone. Really hope that you can make it to the workshop. I'm going to be talking about it all along the week when we're there. This is a workshop to really inform you about the guidebook that was completed. So the center did a summit on workforce development a couple years ago. From that came the suggestion and the actual execution of an NCHRP project, which produced a guidebook to help all of you with workforce development in your agencies, in your DOTs, that are specifically for TSMO positions. And so the workshop is going to focus on understanding what the purpose and the structure of the guidebook is, what are some of the resources that are provided, and what are the context for it, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. There will be information about how the knowledge, skills, and abilities of 17 different positions that are available for people to choose from. There's also information on, how do you recruit? What about hiring? What about training and professional development? And to give you a little bit more of a preview, each of the positions were actually related to some aspect of the CMM that you can refer on how you can improve not only your agency CMM capabilities through programs and projects, but also, the workforce that you're going to need to do that. This is definitely something that is relevant, and so we want to take a couple hours, and this will be the first of its kind type of workshop where throughout the rest of the year we're going to try and get as many eyeballs and get as many ears as we can to understand what's in the guidebook, how to use the resources that are presented, and at the same time, really what is it that we're going to be pushing out, and also bringing everyone together as it relates to workforce development. The last thing that I'll mention for today is that we are taking a lot of the workforce report from the NCHRP report and deconstructing it to put it on our website so that it's not only searchable but it's digestible, just so that we don't force you to read, a pretty lengthy NCHRP report, but also so that it's accessible, anytime on our website for all of you. So I know there's a couple of other choices on Thursday, but really, if you don't have a role on one of the other ones, you should really come to this workshop. So I'll stop selling at this point, Pat. Turn it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. So next we'll talk about the working group on connected and automated vehicles. Venkat, did you want to go into a little more detail here?
Sure. Thank you, Pat. The working group on connected and automated vehicles within CTSO meets Thursday morning starting at 8 a.m. We will have some opening remarks by the working group chairs, Colin Castle with Michigan DOT, and our new incoming co-chair, Mark Kopko with Pennsylvania DOT. The working group will then kick into a roundtable discussion on its ongoing activities, so up until now, and then a discussion on the strategic plan and action plan, looking at if any tweaks need to be made for the upcoming year. And next, we're going to have a more detailed discussion on a couple of 20-102 NCHRP 20-102 projects, one related to the connected road classification system, and the other one related to the impacts of connected and autonomous vehicles on highway infrastructure. These are guest presentations by the consultant team, the researchers who are working on these projects, who are going to be presenting on their findings or preliminary findings. And then we're going to have a facilitated discussion, an update on the AASHTO SPAT challenge, and a broad review of deployments, any lessons learned, and challenges. And after a short break, the working group will be having a focused discussion on autonomous vehicles, looking at it from an infrastructure owner perspective, in terms of getting the infrastructure ready for autonomous vehicles. What does that mean? We've had a series of national dialogue sessions that were facilitated by Federal Highway. Many of our members were in attendance at several of these meetings. What are some of the pertinent outcomes that can be shared with the work group? And then the Cooperative Automated Transportation CAT Coalition focus area updates, and how the working group members can engage with the coalition activities. And we're going to adjourn at noon. Pat, turn it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Venkat. So next is the working group on freight operations. Brad, did you want to talk about this, or would you prefer that I cover this slide?
I'll talk a little bit about it. We can talk a little bit about what's going on in this. So Dave Huff is the co-chair of the working group on freight operations. So first, after some introductions, there's going to be an update on from AASHTO, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, Specialized Carriers and Rigging Association, the North American Pilot Vehicle Safety Alliance that's focused on escort vehicles. There's going to be an update from those. Actually, we've had a lot of attendance over the past through this freight operations group from those committees and organizations. So there's going to be an update from them. We're going to talk about harmonization. We're going to talk about truck parking. Then talk about bridge strikes. Talk about some examples in across the country, bridge strikes. Talk about initiatives to prevent bridge strikes. We're going to have a break at 10 a.m. Then going to have a presenter talking, Douglas Briggs from the Highways of National Defense is going to talk about the routes that link our power projection platforms, PPP, to the seaports. So that's going to be a good presentation. Then we're going to have a discussion about what you heard Patrick just mention earlier about the Center of Excellence, the Workforce Development Initiative. Then we're going to get into research, talk about research opportunities, and then concluding that with discussion, we're going to bring out the work plan again and talk about different updates to that and then different initiatives that we want to include based on our discussion at this meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So just to elaborate on a couple more items, because this is at the same time as the Workforce Development Workshop, that's why we gave them a little bit of time, and they're going to come talk about the specific workforce development issues that are most important to people that deal with freight issues. So we're going to get just a snippet of it most interested to our members. And harmonization is I think, really probably the big initiative that we're going to be working on over the next year, harmonizing oversize and overweight permits across the U.S. So anybody who's a part of this committee or who deals with these issues, I encourage you to come to this breakout session. So here's the link to register. You don't have to write that down. It's available in the useful links section at the bottom. The room block closes July 19th. I see we've had a couple questions asking for an extension. I'm trying to get in touch with our meeting planner right now to find out if we will get an extension or not. If she contacts me before the webinar is over, I'll tell you. Otherwise, I'll be sending out an email later with more information about the room block. And it sounds like a couple people are having trouble booking their room. Please send me an email, and I'll connect you to our meeting planner, Megan Wozniak, and we'll help you sort out any problems you might be having with the room block. So we're going to turn things over to some other Q&A right now, but first, Gamata Murthy has a couple of comments he wants to add. Gamata?
Thank you, Pat. And first I want to thank Russ and Tony for leading this discussion today. I know Russ is going to come to the end and close it off. I have two plugins. I want to reinforce what Patrick mentioned in the beginning. One is on Monday at the business meeting. There's a 2-hour slot exclusively for state DOTs to come, and the members to come and talk about their state ongoing TSMO activities, including cooperative automations, connected vehicle, autonomous vehicle, mobility as a service, mobility on demand. Any of these ongoing, emerging, those topics are of your interest, and also maybe some new ones which we don't know. The whole idea is that, sometime back when we started revamping the operations within AASHTO committee programs, we did this when we did it back in 2012. Those who have come to Phoenix, the first TSMO meeting we did under Don Hunt's leadership at that time, we did this round-robin discussion with the states. And we want to redo that now after 7 years of hard work you all have put into this program. And you have seen the labor of it. I mean, how many things have evolved from that point. You have a Center for Excellence. You have a Cooperative Automated Coalition. Many NCHRP projects that are coming to your updates today are the ones you envisioned some time back and put the scopes together, and we got the money. So this is your opportunity to reshape the program, bring your input in. So I really value that 2-hour slot. And if it is a good one, we will do it as a recurring item in some form or the shape. But I want to plug that as a prime thing for this whole meeting. In my opinion, that is the real essence of this coming together as one team on that Monday afternoon. So this is our chair's input too. I want to pass it on to you all. And she would be there in the meeting personally. And I expect Tony and Russ and other leadership members on the call, John Hibbert and others, would join the discussions and stimulate the discussion and get that input out of us. So that is one aspect of it. The second one I would bring in is that there are many competing activities. I can see that, or sometimes there's an overlap. But we tried our best to get less conflict. But if you're missing anything, some way to make sure that you get that information, we'll do every effort. So perhaps Patrickson can help you all get the information, some information that comes out of that in a memo format or a write-up or a taped information available to you in some form or shape, and we'll do for the other programs too. So Pat, that's my quick plug-in. I want to give it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So any other questions? I think I've answered all the questions that I saw so far. Again, any problems with the registration, contact me or Megan Wozniak, our meeting planner, offline, and we'll help you out. But any other questions? Not seeing anything yet. Maybe I'll just wait one more minute, and if we don't have any other questions by then, we'll wrap things up. Someone said they missed page 7. So you can download the presentation from the box down there. It says download presentations. Right, Nilu? So everybody can access the full slide deck there.
Yes. Yeah, everybody can directly download it from that box.
Well, I don't think we have anything else coming in. So Russ, I think I'll just turn things over to you for some closing remarks. This is Mr. Russ Buchholz, our other vice chair from North Dakota.
Morning and afternoon for those. First of all, I want to thank the National Operations Center of Excellence and the AASHTO staff as well as the committee members for this overview. Hopefully you understand as far as it's a great agenda. And then as Tony mentioned this morning in his opening remarks, we want to encourage you again to register for the event and also confirm your hotel registrations. And then also as far as what Gamana mentioned is that 5 minutes for your states for the hot topics and the priorities of operations. Please have something in mind. We are going to record those things so that way we can share that with all the states. Some might not be able to make it to Jacksonville, Wyoming, but so please come with what you have, and I think you'll experience what you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. So become prepared. And that's all I have. So thank you. I appreciate everyone dialing into this and connecting to the webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I want to thank again everyone for attending today's webinar, and hope you a great rest of your day.